Muskies rock! At the Ottawa River Musky Factory.
Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thanks to Slide and the Drift for that kickin' introductory song. Love you guys. And gosh, I miss live music. Like everyone, can't wait to get back for that. This week, week 9 of the Musky Monday seminar series. Got a letter this afternoon from Mike Baudouin saying, "Are you guys really having Gord Pizer on the show this evening?" And Mike, I am so proud and pleased to tell you that, yeah, we have Gourd Piser on the program. On my list of dream guests, when I sat down and wrote this out a couple months ago, Gord was at the top of the list. Canada's best angler. Yeah, maybe best angler for a whole bunch of different species. One of the best teachers that we've ever had. Somebody I'm so pleased to have known and learned from for a lot of years. And if you hang out this evening, you can't help but learn a lot. I'd read Gord's resume to you, but it's only a 90-minute program, and Gord's resume is 90 minutes long in itself. So we'll talk more about that when I introduce Gord and grandson Liam later. I got to see Liam do his first presentation with the Hamilton chapter in January. Great events is going on in Hamilton. Thanks to Dave Belisle. Liam's 19. He talks like he's 50. And that's what happens to you when you hang out in Gord's boat long enough. So we're gonna get Liam to tell you a young person's perspective on learning, his observations so far. Can't wait to get to that. Some thank yous, which we always get out of the way at the start of our show. Thanks to you, the listener. Wow, our audience gets stupidly bigger every week. And so I guess we're doing what you like, and we're only doing what you tell us you like and you want to hear. So keep sending in your questions, your thoughts for topics. Jason Michaud sent in a great topic on bait fish. I talked to Sean about that. That's a huge topic on its own. So Sean's going to go away and do a little studying. That'll come up at a presentation with Sean on the Ask the Biologist segment. Yeah, send in your questions this evening. We got a lot to talk about, and we'll definitely feature some of those. Thanks always to the Ottawa River Musky Factory and Musky Factory Baits team, to Mike Spratt, to Jason Riley, to Lisa Goodyear. Hey, Lisa, how you doing?
Hey, John, pretty good, thank you.
Nice to see you as always. Thanks for making us look as good as we possibly can. That's a challenging job. You do a great job at it. So appreciate it. What do you want to tell us?
Well, of course, we want to talk about a couple of events coming up. Pretty pumped for the Odyssey. And I think we're going to have to rename April Musky Month now, because we've got a second event coming up from a really passionate group, a Facebook group called Musky Trader Canada. And we've been working very closely with one of the admins, Danny Colley, and we're proud to announce we're going to be a sponsor of this event. And it's just another great event based on musky education and, more importantly, raising funds for musky research. So a lot of information is going to be coming on that one shortly. We'll share that with you. The one thing I'll suggest you do is you go and you check out the Facebook page. Join it. If you'd like an invite, send me a message. I'll get you invited into the group. And it's an awesome group of anglers who are very passionate about muskies, and another opportunity to raise awareness and money to support research. So pretty excited.
Me too. Two huge events to raise money for musky research. And, you know, if you've been watching this show, we tell you why that's so important, and more important than ever. So, yeah, kudos to the Muskies Canada group. Kudos to the Musky Trader guys for this. Can't wait to be a part of that. So, terrific. We'll see you later in the show, Lisa. All the best. And Mike Kadura in the background, as always, answering your question. Hey, Mike. Nice to see
John.
you as always.
Good to see you
How are your time fingers?
They're pretty good there, John. They're pretty good. I'm enjoying tying these lures. You know, it's such a blast. It keeps the year going for me, and it's muskies all the time. So between that and Facebook, where make sure you like us on Facebook at Musky Factory Baits. And if you see us on YouTube and all the videos are showing up there too, make sure you subscribe, and that'll make me even happier. And what do you think? Mustache, you like that? Kind of
Beautiful. Matches the beard. And that's how
Thanks.
much I know about colors. So good stuff. Good stuff, Mike.
Thanks.
Mike will be answering your questions behind the scenes. So will Lisa. Every question you send in, if we don't deal with it tonight, we'll answer it in the next day or two. Promise. We've done that with every one of the, I don't know, going on 1,500 comments and questions so far. So keep them coming. I want to throw a shout out to Anthony Sapiano, Sapitizer Baits. Anthony dropped off a couple of baits for me this week. Interestingly, if you listen to Sean Landsman's talk on colors, you missed that, you really want to go back and review it. I said to Anthony, send me over what you want me to have. Send me over what's worked for you. This fits in exactly with what Sean's been saying about colors. This was in one of Anthony's top producers. This one right here. One of the topics we're going to talk about tonight is lure modifications. Gord is a master of lure modifications, a huge believer in being different than making your bait look different than all the other baits that muskies see. So we're going to go there this evening. Thanks a lot for that, Anthony. Can't wait. Throw out a huge thank you to Shimano. I'm so proud to be on the Shimano team for a lot of years. They drive muskie research. They drive research on equipment and support who supports you. And you see their name everywhere, supporting good causes in the fishing world. Thanks to Andre Lalone, Crushliner Boats, Mercury Motors. Andre is the best boat guy I've ever had. He's out in Wendover. People have sent in a bunch of questions about battery maintenance, boat questions, and I just send them over to Andre. So appreciate all that you've done for me over the years, Andre. Suic Lures, Chaos Tackle, great products that catch fish. Sail, Canada's Outdoor Superstore, Canadian. Buy Canadian when you can. More important than ever. I want to throw a shout out to Megan McGregor from Fully Promoted in Peterborough. Hey, Megan. I just threw some hats up behind me last week. We got our samples in, and a bunch of people saw them already and wrote in to see if they can get them. We haven't placed a bulk order. If you see a hat that you like back there, special design, let us know. We'll have those shortly as well. And as always, a huge thank you to Muskies Canada. Big part of my personal learning curve over the years. My favorite thing about Muskies Canada, you already know on the badge, it says sport, fishing, and research. And Muskie Factory Baits loves that research angle so much. We give $2 from every bait we sell directly to Muskie Research through Muskies Canada. More important than ever. The Muskie Monday Seminar Series, Lisa said April is muskie month. March is an incredible muskie month for us right here. Coming up, we have Gord this week, Jim Sarek next week, Pete Bowman the week after that, Pete Maney the week after that, and rounding out March is Jason Quintano. If you heard my questions to Spencer Berman about his numbers on Lake St. Clair, I bet those answers dropped a lot of people's jaws. And I'm going to ask the same questions to Jason. And as a troller with a bunch of lines out, Jason's answer is going to blow your mind even more. Jason is the most technical troller I've ever been in a boat with. And so can't wait to have him on. I got to throw a shout out to Ryan Pickering and the Kitchener chapter for their first ever online event last week. A trolling panel, huge response to that. Great to see Muskies Canada going in different directions and adapting 21st century technology. It's tough to get gray-haired people to do that, but more important now to reach out to where the new audience is, and Liam's going to make some comments on that during the show as we go along. And now, our friend, Ask the Biologist, Dr. Sean Landsman. Sean's here to take me and all of you to school every week. We're so happy to have him here. Sean's going to be at the Musky Odyssey. Sean and I are both presenting on the Ottawa River for the Ottawa chapter. He's also going to be at the Musky Trader Symposium. And you guys have heard me talk about Project Noble Beast a lot. And in my mind, that's the perfect project that marries the importance of research for taking better care of your fish, but it also provides critical information as an angler about behavior. Sean's going to go into that in depth at the Musky Trader Symposium later on. Can't wait. And I should just be listening at this point when I have people like Sean on. So what are you going to tell us today, Sean?
Today, we're going to talk about musky spawning and early life stage survival and some of the things that that can contribute to establishing year class strengths in muskies. You know, we all know that muskies are difficult to catch, and a big part of that is because there's just not that many of them out there. And of course, one reason for that is they have kind of varied rates of survival at early life stages. They got a lot of things working against them. So you know that's one of the reasons why we need to be really careful with how we handle them, and that when we do pursue them, we do catch them, that we're handling them the best way possible. So definitely, if you're interested in attending the Musky Odyssey or the Musky Trader event, I'll be talking about proper handling practices, and I think we've talked a little bit about that on the program before. But it's definitely behooves us all to handle them properly, because they're kind of fragile. So I'm going to talk about that today. There we go. Thanks, Lisa. All right, so at this point, at least here in Ontario, what is it? It's March 1st. We've got probably, let's see, we probably have about another like 3 months before they start spawning, at least here in Eastern Ontario. This is going to vary all across the latitudes of the muskies range in terms of when exactly they start spawning. So there would be some places down in the south where they're going to get going soon. Again, we've got another few months, and then probably in Northwest Ontario, Lake of the Woods, that area, it's going to be even a bit longer after us. So nevertheless, I think it's a topic worth discussing and chatting about. Before we first dive into some of the facts about musky spawning, it's important to go over a couple of different strategies that different fishes use to reproduce. There's primarily two tactics. One is through parental care. So bass, of course, build nests and protect their young. Usually, it is the male that does the parental care in bass. Same in panfish. So that top photo there is a pumpkin seed, and it's guarding its nest. Directly below him is a leaf on the bottom, and you can see some lighter colored objects. Those are its eggs. And so, we're talking about fish in this kind of category, and those that display some level of parental care, typically producing less eggs that are of a higher quality. Sharks are also in this category. Typically, sharks, especially those that give birth to live young, they aren't necessarily protecting the young once they leave the body of the female, but they are investing so much offspring in those individuals that there's some degree of parental care there in terms of just allocation of resources. But the other category is broadcast spawning, and so this is really widely used by fish all over the world, including most ocean fishes. And so that picture there, believe that's a picture of some kind of snapper, but grouper do this as well. and they'll form these aggregations, and they basically shoot up in the water column and then distribute their, in that case, that big cloud of white is milt or sperm, and then the females will release their eggs. All the sperm and the eggs mix together, they get fertilized, and then those eggs drift on ocean currents to some faraway destination. Muskies are part of this category of broadcast spawning fishes. So they are, they're typically going to be basically swimming along shorelines and depositing their eggs, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. But muskies are a broadcast spawner. So how do we actually sex muskies? This is a really actually good way of sexing muskies, is by looking at the shape of what we call their urogenital opening. So the female there is on the left. This is from a published paper, and the female's there on the left, and she has kind of what's been called a sort of pear-shaped urogenital opening, and the males have more of a key-shaped opening. And so especially like in June, their urogenital openings might still be a little bit inflamed from the reproductive period, from the spawning season. And so it might be a good chance to really see some pronounced differences in their openings. They may get a little more blurry, so to speak, as you progress through the season and maybe get into the fall. But usually the male urogenital openings are pretty obvious. So if you were to flip one over, next time you catch a fish, just flip one over and take note. Maybe just grab a picture with your phone, and then you can take a look back at this presentation, since they're all recorded, and take a look at what this slide shows you there. So one of the questions that some people sometimes have are spawning size and age for fish, for muskies in particular. Muskies first mature around 4 years of age. The one caveat to that is that their first year or two or even 3 might not produce fully viable eggs and sperm. And so really when we talk about the reproductive potential of muskies, we're typically talking about fish that are 6 to 7 years of age, and around, at least for females, around 31 to 34 inches in length. Of course, with males, they would be a lot smaller at that same age. There's what's called a very distinct sexual dimorphism, meaning there's very distinct size differences between females and males, and so females tend to be much larger than females. In fact, it would be pretty rare to get a male muskie longer than 48 inches. And of course, we know there's plenty of muskies that get well above 50 inches, and those would all probably be, for the most part, females. But yeah, so about 6 years of age is when we kind of consider female muskies and male muskies to be fully mature at that point. Okay, so in terms of muskie spawning, we typically see this occur between 49 and 59 Fahrenheit. So again, sometime in the spring. That's going to vary in terms of months, depending on your location. Typically, muskies will pair up, although I've only seen muskies actually spawning once, and that was in Illinois at a lake about 20 minutes from where I grew up, and I actually saw 3 of them. So a menage a trois, so to speak. So, but typically speaking, they tend to pair up. They tend to spawn over vegetation. So I just made a note in this picture here. It's one of the best photos I've ever seen of a pair of muskies spawning, or at least paired up there. But I made a note there that they might not be actively spawning, since they're moving clearly over rocks and shallow water there. That's not to say they won't drop their eggs just wherever they can. They may very well do that, but they tend to prefer vegetation. They also will spawn in very shallow water. So there you can see the dorsal fin and upper lobe of the caudal fin, especially on that big one on the right, is out of the water. And the 3 that I saw were in probably a foot or less of water. But they can also spawn down to 1 to 2 meters, so 5 to 6 feet. They can use tributaries too if they're available. They will actually go up into tributaries. They'll use back bays especially. A couple other facts here. The eggs can sink to the bottom, so they're negatively buoyant. They just sink right down to the bottom. And it's thought that they're actually not adhesive. Although when I was poking around, there seems to be a little bit of conflicting evidence. But it looks like they're generally considered to not be adhesive. So in other words, the coating of the egg itself in some fish species can actually be adhesive. So some of you may know what a smelt is. Smelt have very adhesive eggs. If you've ever caught a smelt in the spring and a female, you get eggs all over your hands. And that's thought to be able to hold that egg in current and help it hold to vegetation or whatever they may have dropped the eggs onto. But muskies are thought to not really have at least much of an adhesive coating, which does have some implications. And I'll maybe touch on that in just a minute. I'll get to the siltation comment there in just a second. But I did want to say that, and John kind of alluded to this at the beginning, that this whole period is very stressful for fish. It is one of the periods during the year where they experience it's probably the period of the year where they experience the most stress naturally in their environment. There's a reason we were seeing lots of fish on the St. Lawrence River dying from viral hemorrhagic septicemia virus during the spring. And part of that is because during this time period, they're allocating a ton of energy to reproduction. And they don't have a lot of energy to fight pathogens like viruses or bacterial infections or anything like that. And so they have kind of limited resources available to them to fight off that kind of thing. So all told, it is a very stressful period. So, if you're out there, maybe you're fishing for pike and, you see some muskies up shallow and the temptation is there to fire your husky jerk up in the shallows and maybe try and get one to bite, you might want to just leave the area. Just consider giving them a break. Okay, threats to early life stages. So like I said earlier, muskies are pretty fragile. They have a hard time establishing pretty strong year classes. And part of that is due to just susceptibility at early life stages. They don't display parental care. So they're not investing a ton of energy into their eggs. So their eggs are going to be pretty small, going to be a lot of them, but they have to make a lot because they're not of super high quality. They don't have a ton of oils and lipids within the egg that the juveniles can feed off of before they can actually feed with their mouths. The parents aren't around to protect them, so they're at the complete mercy of the environment and what's around them. So there's several things that can potentially affect the survival of early life stages. So eggs and yolk sac fry and the juveniles, like that little baby one there. Destruction of suitable spawning habitat it just goes without saying. If you have shoreline development and you rip out a nice bay or nice weed bed and to make way for a nice long dock, or dredge out an area to allow a boat to get in and access an area more easily, that is one of the the most damaging things that you can do, not only to muskies but kind of any fish species. Siltation is also a potential concern here. As I said, their eggs are negatively buoyant and they don't really have an adhesive coating. So even if there was like some vegetation or sticks or something, they might kind of ricochet off that debris and eventually just settle onto the bottom. And the concern there is if there's like lots of wave action, or there's been shoreline armoring or shoreline development, and you've got lots of silt and wind and wave action, and it's pulling in clay off the banks, that you just start layering on silt above the eggs. And the eggs will need some water circulation to get oxygen into the developing embryo. And if they're starved of that, then they're going to die. And so that's a concern. That's why you see in hatcheries, they have bubblers and they have aerators that are keeping the water moving to prevent, and you'll see eggs actually moving around in these containers when they're raising muskies. And that's to try and keep that water flowing and get good oxygen supply to the eggs. We also have issues with predation. So sunfish are classic egg predators. So things like bluegills and pumpkin seeds, other kinds of sunfish will also eat eggs. Gobies are another known egg predator. That's why there's some concern about their high abundance on the St. Lawrence River being kind of potentially damaging to muskie populations on the St. Lawrence River. Then, of course, if the muskies are able to hatch, grow from the egg sac fry stage into a free feeding juvenile, they're still not out of the woods yet. They still have to contend with other bigger muskies, like last year's progeny, pike, including that year's pike, bass, walleye, you name it, bigger sunfish, crappie. They're fair game for a whole host of potential predators. So they face a number of different challenges at those early life stages. I just wanted to talk a little bit about pike. And because when we talk about muskies, it's hard to not and spawning. It's hard to not also talk a little bit about pike too. So what we know about pike and their spawning habits is that they tend to spawn a little earlier than muskies. But of course, we know there's hybrid muskies out there, so there's not complete separation of the two spawning seasons. We do know that there is some overlap. And one of the things that people have noticed, especially what's going on now in the Kawarthas, and there have been other papers that have documented anecdotal and circumstantial evidence of muskie population declines with increasing abundance of pike or an influx of non-native pike into a system. When people see those trends occur, one of the theories anyway, or hypotheses, is that the young of the year pike, because they're born earlier, they have a growth advantage. So they can reach a certain size earlier than a muskie can. And so they may be at a stage where they're able to feed on little baby muskies much earlier than like a muskie would be able to feed on similar sized prey. And so they just have a little bit better growth advantage. And because of that, they pose a potential threat to muskies. The other thing is that white pike tend to hunt in vegetation when they're little. And muskies, if they happen to venture into these weed beds as fry, are vulnerable in these habitats. And so one way that muskies can potentially escape predation is to actually get down into rocks. But if there's not a lot of rock habitat, then they're in a tough position there. They better be praying to the muskie gods that those pike don't see them if they venture into those weed beds. But there was a study that actually looked at how much rocks can actually afford protection for muskies, and that pike weren't really able to. They didn't find that pike ate a lot of muskies where there was rock habitat. So the thinking there is that the muskies actually get down into the crevices between the rocks, and because they're pretty well camouflaged, the pike just can't see them, and that provides some protection for them. So yeah, I just wanted to add that little bit of information about pike. And as always, if you have more questions, please send them to John, or you can email them directly to me. And there's my email address, and you can get a hold of me there. So thanks.
Fantastic. As usual, Sean. Let me ask you about research done on where muskies spawn. And do you think that is there evidence that they spawn in more than one location? And I'll just preface that question by, you work with Dr. Stephen Cook at Carleton. There's more muskie research driven out of there than anywhere else. And I know about I think it was a 51.5-inch fish with a transmitter on it in the downtown Rideau that during the spawning temperatures they followed, and it went distinctly between two locations on the river that were 3 or 4 kilometers apart. So I've heard that people think that they spawn in 2 locations. What do you know about that?
They can. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Typically, muskies are known to. I didn't actually mention this in the presentation, but I think I've mentioned this before, that they are faithful to their own spawning. They're faithful to particular spawning locations. And it's possible that they may sample a couple of different areas, or they may spread their eggs out among a couple of different sampling site or spawning sites. That's not a bad strategy. If things go to hell in a handbasket in one location, it's pretty not a bad idea to put all your eggs in one basket, so to speak, in one location and distribute them into another spot. So it's definitely possible.
And there's a 10-year study that you guys are 3 years into at Carleton right now. An amazing study that's going to be supported through the Musky Trader fundraiser this spring, looking at how muskies use tributaries. And I've seen muskies during spawning time way up the creeks and way up the tributaries. So more research on how they use tribs, if they spawn in there, and using the tribs to spawn, in places like the St. Lawrence, where there's a ton of gobies in the main river, but the gobies don't know the different water in the tributaries. That's huge research right there, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. In the St. Lawrence, it's a peculiar body of water because they have a lot of spawning habitat available to them. Typically, from my understanding, is they tend to spawn in bays there, but there's no reason why they couldn't just go into a tributary. And I suspect that there's probably, especially in the Ottawa and the Rideau, which is what we're going to try and set out to determine. I fully expect that fish are definitely going into those tributaries. It makes sense for a variety of reasons. So, yeah.
Yeah, in the 90s, one of the fun projects that Muskies Canada Ottawa guys did was go and look in the creeks, not even the tributary rivers, but way up the creeks for spawning muskies. And yeah, they weren't that hard to find. So again, great research coming up that's going to help us learn more about muskies, muskie behavior, and protecting them. So lots of good things going on with you and Dr. Stephen. Thanks for being here as always, Sean. We'll see you next week.
Happy to be here.
Okay, terrific stuff. And wow, what we've all been waiting for, Gourd Piser. I just so happy to have Gord on the show. I've been a fan of Gord's long before I ever knew him. And I read everything that I can that he writes because it's pure gold. It's wisdom that you can take to the bank. Gord and Liam were at the Hamilton Muskies Canada chapter event in January. Thanks to Dave. I took 8 pages of notes. I've been doing this a long time, and I go to school every time I'm around Gord. So more learning from Gord today. One of the proudest personal moments I have is a couple, 3 decades ago. My dreams were to maybe participate in something in Fisherman and Outdoor Canada magazine. And I've been able to participate in articles with Gord for both of those magazines. Thanks for that. And at the Hamilton chapter meeting, one of the best moments of that was early on when Gord smiled and giggled like a kid and looked into the camera and said, he said, all I think about are fish and fishing 24 hours a day. And I realized at that moment that I have Gourd Piseritis, and that's a really good thing in life. So, so happy to have you here, and Gord's favorite boat partner and fishing partner, Liam Whetter. Both you guys, let's bring them out now. Hey, gang.
Hey, John. Hi, Liam.
Hey, Gord. John.
He's down in Kingston, John. I lost my net man.
Yeah, well, you're going to get him back for the summer, I'm sure. He's going to want to be back there. And yeah, we have Kingston, we have Kenora, and we have Ottawa tonight. And Liam, let me ask you, Kingston, you have access to all the species of fish that we want to fish. Have you been able to get out and fish there?
Nope, not once. Sorry, I wish.
Not once yet. Yeah, we were supposed to get in a boat together this past fall. COVID thwarted that. Lots to look forward to. You can catch everything within a very short distance of Kingston. So,
Big fish too.
yeah, absolutely. More coming up. Gord, you unveiled some cutting edge research at the Toronto Fishing and Boat Show last week. I wanted to start this off by saying Gord knows his poo, and nobody knows fish poo more than Gord. And so tell us about fish poo and how that's going to help us maybe catch more muskies. What's going on?
Lisa, I sent Lisa some slides. So maybe we'll hit, there's the first one. And, you know, John, I first have to give credit to a really good friend of mine, Jeff Madity. And Jeff's like you and I and Liam. He's obsessed, in his case, believe it or not, he's obsessed with northern pike, maybe a little more. Now, Jeff heads up, and he always gets mad at me for saying he heads up the hatchery program in Saskatchewan, but he does. He's at the Capel fish hatchery there, but his specialty is northern pike, but he comes over and fishes with me almost every year. In fact, every year except this past year, just for fun. And as I say, Jeff's specialty is northern pike. And I've taken him to some of the places, John, when you and I talk, when we're out fishing together and I come down and visit you, both of us, I think we leave with more questions than we began the day with. And that's the interesting thing about muskies. We rarely can answer the questions, and we leave with more on our minds than we started the day with. So Jeff's over, and he knows. I did a thing for the Toronto Spring Fishing Show, and it believe it or not, it's where Liam caught his second biggest muskie ever. And we'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. But I also had 30 years ago, I had the vice president of Muskies Inc. from the second largest chapter in the U.S. From Madison, Wisconsin. And I had that gentleman out. He caught his personal biggest. And John, this is a rock. And I'm for the folks that are listening to us, I hope they send in lots of questions. I wanted to say this as well, because we're not here to spiel. I'm not here. And I'd much rather answer really good questions. And if folks have got questions, by all means, put them up and we'll answer them. But anyway, this is a rock, John, a single rock. And it's on a very isolated piece of structure. And so I take Jeff there and I show him this. In 40 years, this is 40 years of fishing one specific structure. The fish only come off one rock on one side of it. We never ever catch them, and Liam knows this, on the other side, but we raise giants. And literally, we raise 52, 53, 54-inch fish, and I mean giants. And but we can never hook them. And guys have sent me emails saying, try this, do this, I do this. Trust me, in 40 years, we've tried it all. And so I take Jeff there, and this is what we're kind of working on now. And Jeff works with the University of Saskatchewan, the ichthyology lab there on northern pike. And he's actually working on dinosaur DNA from northern pike that were here like thousands of years ago, and how much of that DNA is in the fish that we've got today. And I mean, some of the stuff we talk about is crazy. But anyway, what he said to me, and we're talking about this, and it really, a light went on, and that is, we don't catch first enough muskies to really, I mean, even if we catch a couple hundred a year, which most of us don't, we still don't catch enough to really lead us and understand what we're doing. And so we're looking for a proxy. And I'm really glad, actually, that Sean was talking about pike and pike spawning and muskies and how they interact. There's never been a world record muskie caught in a lake that didn't have northern pike in it. Every single world record muskie came from a lake with northern pike. And the pike are important both to the fact that there's not as many muskies in the lake, but also important to the fact that that's what grows a world record muskie. And there's only one way muskies can stave off extinction because of a fish like northerns in the system, and that's to grow bigger. And you can only grow bigger and you grow bigger in order to lay eggs. And so northerns encourage that. And so, you see guys that stick knives in northerns and say, I'm saved a muskie. That's just nonsense biology. Anyway, I'm out with Jeff, and he says, we need a proxy for muskies, and northern pike are probably it. And the other thing, nature has bestowed on northern pike certain survival. They've given northerns a survival toolbox, if you will. And it's very likely that many of those same tools that are in the muskie toolbox are in the northern are in the muskies as well. And here's the key. We always talk about places, I always do anyway, we talk about sweet spots or the spot on the spot. And I think that's a mistake. It doesn't convey to us the right message. And I think it makes a lot more sense for me. And I start thinking, I no longer think about these as the spot on the spot or the sweet spot. They are the kill zone. And when you think about it as the kill zone and not the spot on the spot, it starts to make a whole bunch of sense. And so Jeff's out and I'm showing him this spot, and then we're talking about it afterwards. And he says, I guarantee where we raise those fish and never get them to bite, they are likely pike defecation areas. In this case, they're likely musky defecation areas. Shallow, calm, out of the wind, warm, and classic musky spots. We raise the fish, but we don't catch them. If you know those areas, John, usually within 1 or 2 casts away, there is a kill zone. And suckers, tulipies, all the forage, when they go through, muskies or pike don't eat where they defecate. And so when it's time to eat, they leave that area where they're lounging in, where we're seeing them, where they follow lazily, and they go to the kill zone. So if the folks that are listening in know of those spots, geez, I know a spot in the bay exactly like Pyzer's talking about. Spend some time very close by, 1, 2, 3, 4 casts away, and you're likely to find the kill zone. And Liam knows about this, and when I finish this little jibber jabber, he can tone in because it's where he caught his second biggest fish 2 years ago. But the small pike and muskies, they're fatally attracted because they smell the fact that and to them, it's actually attractive. It's attractive to them, and it's likely that those smallest sockets are decoyed, and the muskies and northern eat them. Almost every big northern I have ever caught had another northern down its throat. And I think that cannibalism is hugely important. And the smaller pike are eaten, and they're not recruited, and that's to the advantage of the pike population. But the key is that pike don't eat where they don't kill, where they defecate, but close by is one of those key spots. And next slide, Lisa, and then I'll let Liam do some talking here. If we could, there we go. So pike on pike predation, it's a really important mechanism. It grooms the population. It's the way those superior genes are passed on. And what we have found, Jeff even speculates, and I think this is really important too. He suspects that a muskie will pull off these shallow rocks, or a shallow rock or shallow area. It might even go out into deeper water and defecate out there. The tulipies, the ciscos, the suckers, all of the forage fish, that they smell it and they go, oh my God, they bunch up tightly and they pass through quickly. And where do you think they're funneled towards? Right into the kill zone. It's brilliant. And so I come back and I bring Liam and John, and we can talk about this if there's folks listening in. And it's the reason I always say it is so much fun to travel and go to different lakes. But with muskies, it is so much better if you get to know a lake extremely well. Sean talked about how faithful they are to their spawning areas. They are faithful to these summer home ranges. Once the temperature gets above 15 degrees Celsius, they lock into their summer home ranges. They can be as small as 400 acres. We always say if we raise a big fish, within 4 days, we should catch it. And now 400 acres on a productive system, probably like the Kawarthas. Up here, you start getting into onto Lake of the Woods. Home ranges probably go 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 acres for a fish. There's definitely some overlap. You get into the really clear dryberries and whitefish bays and clearwater bays, and they're even bigger still. But it blows my mind on this defecation theory. And Jeff's going to go out. We're actually going to go out this summer. And if you put a camera down, it looks like seagull poop laying on the bottom. It looks like white grease marks on the bottom of the lake. And when you find one of those in and around a good musky spot, potentially and likely one of the best areas you could ever fish is not on that spot, but you find that kill zone close by. And here's my point. Once you find it, we go there and we've got a picture here. The next slide, I think, Lisa. No, the next one? No, I guess the next one still. Go back, please. Maybe I didn't load it up. Anyway, Liam's second biggest fish came off that spot. If you don't cast within 10, 15 feet, you will not get a bite. You simply will not see them. It's not in the kill zone. Liam, you talk about we call our shots, John. And that's an amazing thing to do, being able to call your shot on a musky spot. Liam, talk about it. And Liam, if I can quote you a bit here, talk about when we use the app to be there.
All right. So like this spot he was talking about is literally, it's like a little saddle, but the saddle is exposed and there's one big boulder just in the corner. And we can pretty much fish the whole spot if we want, but there's really no point. You're just going to tease yourself if you fish the other side and raise a bunch of 50-inch fish. But if you actually hit that rock and just pull in quietly, try not to spook fish, don't like run your engine, and just pull in like crazy, and then you put your bait right on that spot, you can spend 5-10 minutes, make a few casts, and if you don't have a bite, there's no fish there. But on the other hand, it only takes a couple of casts and either you hook one or you see it and hopefully hook it. But we have a spot too.
Wow. My system's freezing up a little bit here, so I didn't catch all of that, but
Okay.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, the fish defecation, I mean, every animal, that's important to every animal. There's no reason why it isn't important to fish. It's amazing that we never thought of this before. It's so simple. We'll throw a shout out to Jason Matterdy, Jeff's brother. We both fish with Jason a lot over the years. Great filmmaker, great fisherman. So again, just cutting edge research on something simple that's teaching us more about fish that we didn't know, and there's so much that we don't know. Fantastic.
John,
Lisa.
John, when you think about it, like you just said, if you defecated in the area where you've told every cisco, every sucker, every walleye, every bait fish, this is the spot to avoid. So it is the last thing you would ever do. And Liam, we go there when the saloon, and I'll put a plug in for Jim Sarrick's Musky Hunter TV app, totally free. We go there And we went 45 minutes to a spot this year. On opening day, Liam catches his biggest fish, and the reason we went there was exactly the reason we are talking about now. There it is. We raised that fish 1 year ago. You talk about it, Knuckle.
Yeah. So this is like a little neck down, kind of like there's a little bit of current and there's a point that sticks out on one side and there's kind of like a rock, little ledge on the other side. And we raised this fish right just off to the left of the current last year. And we were fishing. We hit a lot of spots early in the day on opening day and just fished around, wasn't marking a lot of fish, and then noticed we had a really high peak on the Musky Hunter salooner table. It was like the highest peak of the day. So we decided to hit this spot, and it took like 5 minutes, and we literally caught this fish probably a minute after it said they were feeding. And it was really weird. It took me a really long time to believe in this thing, but it seems like voodoo for some reason because these fish do eat when it's peaking, and it's weird. This fish hit exactly when it was peaked.
Yeah, and that happens, like you said, that happens more times than you can imagine. I'm a big fan of that Jim Sarek Musky Hunter app too. And if nothing else, when you're not catching fish, it gives you hope because there's a peak coming up a little later in the day, weather change, and not catching muskies is a big part of what we do. Understanding when that activity change is going to happen is a big way to pull the trigger on those. So yeah, great learning and another great tool. There's a good question from Brent Bocek. Mr. Pyzer, I listened intently to your presentation for the Hamilton chapter and was wondering why you think the reason for catching fish from only one side, what you think the reason for catching fish from only one side of the rock, current, sun, shade, angle of the rock from the shore.
Can you hear me all right? I honestly believe where we're raising them on the other side is the lounge area. And when it's time to feed, they move, and I kid you not, they move no more than 20 feet through a narrow area you couldn't get a boat through, and they pull in behind one rock. And when they're on that rock, they bite every 40 years. I'm really lucky to have been on Lake of the Woods now for about 44 years. And so been able to run to these spots for 44 years. And when you have never, ever caught a fish 10 feet away, but have raised hundreds, and every single one you have raised comes on the other side behind a boulder. And I take the guy from Wisconsin, their personal best, Liam personal best, Azumi's up on television shows, personal best. That's, it tells you there is something to this lounge area and there's something to the kill zone. So they're there, they're pooping, if you will, on another side. They know they're giving it away, their location. They're lounging there, they're in the sun. I'm hungry, time to feed. Scoop through 20 feet of rocks, pull him behind a boulder, and now I'm ready to kill.
Fantastic. Just on studying a spot for 40 years and continuing to learn on it, one of the things that you taught me 6 or 7 years ago when we were in the boat together was to go back on the spots that I have fished for a long time using the new technology of today's fish finders, and to micro map my spot and to look at it through those different eyes. And it's just taking your learning to a whole different level. Little tiny subtle changes in bottom, in structure, in transition areas, things that you were never able to learn before, you can learn now through mapping and through more modern day electronics. So yeah, the knowledge that we get progresses and continues and will continue for as long as we're out there. Rob Dykins with a good question. How many unique fish would frequent one specific piece of structure like that?
Well, Rob, that's a really good question. And Liam and I never ever name locations. That was a heads up for him not to. This is so isolated. So isolated. I'm sure it's a 1 or 2 fish spot. We live on Lake of the Woods, one of the best musky lakes on the world. It gets phenomenal pressure. You think it's up in northern, we're within 10 hours of 100 million people, and we have 78 main-based lodges on the lake. The intelligent musky, the #1 non-resident sport fishery in Canada, it gets huge intelligent pressure. So I got to be honest, we're not searching for the obvious spots. If it looks, the 20-acre shoal or weed bed, we don't go to it. We're fishing. We're fishing 3, 4, 5 boulders. We have whittled it down. We've whittled it down to such a point. We were worried at one stage, my buddy that I used to fish muskies with all the time, Colin, we never ever caught fish kind of 47, 48 inches and under. Now, we didn't catch hundreds in the course, but we weren't catching small fish. And what I think we attribute that now to, John, is we're not fishing small fish spots. Now, having said that, on one of the best spots I ever had, Al Lindner, actually Dan Sur got his personal best ever on it. We caught, the first time we were there, we got an over 50. I think it was 38 pounds. And by the time I landed it, we had drifted around the corner, came back onto that shoal. We were both figure eighting within 10 casts, both figure eighting over 48-inch fish. So there were 3 giants. They don't school. I think what happens is their home ranges overlap. When Stangy and I were out, that very first image that Lisa's got there, we got that fish on camera, and it was a giant. We had trolled it for probably 20 minutes, and Doug said, there it is right there. Doug said, okay, we've been out. Honest truth, we were out from it was dark when we launched in the morning, and this was probably 4:30, and Doug said, okay, one more spot. We got about 8 minutes, 10 minutes before we lose daylight. We stopped the boat, and instead of just reeling in, I reefed it hard, and then they got him. It was following all the time. So we landed that fish right there on camera, and Doug said, well, geez, we can't leave now. We got to turn around and give it one more trolling path. We didn't go 15 feet, and we got one even bigger than that. So I don't think they're in there. They're certainly not in their schooling, but their home ranges overlap. Now, this was in the fall. Tell folks one really important thing. Between 15 degrees Celsius and 5 degrees Celsius. So from 15 to 5, I think that's 60 to 40. Once it drops below 60 and above 40, muskies wander in the fall. Excuse me, but they don't wander randomly. We did a 5-year study, Barry Corbett, when I was DM here in Kenora. We replicated Mark Ridgway's work on smallmouth. And smallmouth, every day of the week, 7 days, they're swimming 10 to 15 kilometers a day. Every single day. People hear that and they think they're just out. Well, it's not. That's not what they're doing. They're swimming from this point to that reef, to that weed bed, to that point over there, back to here, and they're going on a trap line. So think of it as a trapper on his trap line, and they're checking all those key spots. That's what muskies do. That's what muskies do in the fall. That's what muskies, they're faithful to their spawning areas. They're faithful to their summer home range. They wander in the fall on their home range, and they winter very specifically in home ranges. And that's why when you're trolling, and I come back to that spot, the defecation spot, and you can't troll randomly. When you troll, we are trolling a specific spot. And I'll be honest with you, the only reason we troll, it's too cold to cast. You come to Kenora on December the 22nd or 27th at 18 below with a west wind that's blowing 40 kilometers, you're not casting, trust me. The only thing you can do out there after you shovel snow out of the boat and break ice 20 yards out from shore, there's only one thing you can do is troll. But when we're trolling, Knuckle, what are we doing? We're smashing, banging, ricocheting. We are hitting the kill zone. We're not trolling randomly. We're trolling waypoints. We're hitting the absolute kill zone. Liam, your last fish of the year, talk about what you did.
So we're trolling a specific spot that we fish quite often. It's typically a fall spot. It's a pretty deep, like rock ledge, little saddle between between two islands. And we were just trolling the inside, and we can pass through. It's deep enough to troll over the middle of the saddle, but we were trolling on the outside edge, hit a bunch of rocks, and then had a fish smoke like the left rod, and then just buckled it right over, head shaking, and then came off. But then not even, 20 feet later, caught it on the right-hand side rod. And it was a pretty big fish, and we were banging bottom the whole time, running baits that'll hit bottom. I think that's key if you're trying to fish, let's say 15 to 17 feet of water, run baits that'll hit the bottom at that depth. So you're smashing rocks, causing a ruckus, stirring up the bottom. And that just drives muskies crazy. And especially in the fall, they're trying to eat. They're eating big baits. They're looking, and if there's a big bait smashing bottom, going crazy, it's a turn on for these fish. And that's exactly how we did it.
That's the fish he caught on. He caught his personal best 90 minutes into opening day, and that's how we ended it. 5 minutes with 5 minutes left on the last day of, musky fishing spoiled on these young guys. But Liam's point, John, is so well taken. If you're not banging bottom trolling, if you're not going, oh my God, and you're banging, boom, 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 the second, so you're boom, 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 it's directional changes. It's doing everything we're doing when we're throwing a bait. If you're not smashing bottom, going, oh, I'm going to get hooked up, I'm going to snag, oh, boom, 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 the swim's free, and boom. And if you're just trolling and you're not hitting, you might as well stay home and watch football.
Yep.
Yeah, the Kitchener chapter last week had a 5-member panel of super trollers, and that was a big takeaway that all of them brought up is clipping the bottom and how important that was. Georgian Bay in the States, in a whole bunch of different locations. So absolutely a great strategy. And I just want to go back to your comment on fish being creatures of habit and running place to place to place in a very set pattern. Hedrick Wachelka here in Ottawa is somebody who's taught us an awful lot through Muskies Canada, an absolute fanatic. And Hedrick spent a lot of time just observing muskies. And so off of the Bronson Street Bridge in downtown Ottawa, Hedrick used to sit on the bridge. The Rio River's pretty clear, and you can watch them and move. And that was an observation that he talked about 25 years ago, is they had a very set route that they would go quickly to a weed bed or a weed structure and then work very slowly around the outside of it, looking. And when they were done that, they went quickly to the next structure on their list. And again, then they hunted meticulously around it to the third structure. And so, big water, small water, lake, river, very similar hunting habits and creatures of habits. Yes. Indeed. I saw a question up just a moment ago about trolling upriver or downriver. You guys are talking about lake trolling. What do you think about that in a river? What does that mean to you?
I have to be honest, we don't troll much in the river. We do fish the Winnipeg River quite a bit, but I'll be honest with you, given what I've kind of deciphered, and I know trolling's, my 3 biggest muskies were caught trolling, but I would rather cast And knowing what I know today in terms of how they set up, I could have casted where I got my 3 biggest. I do believe I could have casted if it wasn't mid-November to December. I do believe I could have caught them. The only reason I was trolling was I couldn't cast. So I'm not a good person to ask on trolling. I can tell you from trolling on the lake, though, that 99 times out of 100, trolling with the wind is better than trolling into the wind. A real good friend of mine is Ted Takasaki. Ted won the PWT Walleye World Championship. And Ted will tell you if you're trolling on the Great Lakes for walleye, he will make his trolling pass. He won't even waste the time trolling back up. He pulls everything out of the water, zooms back up, and trolls back with the wind 99 times out of 100. But I'm not a good person to give an answer to trolling in rivers.
I'll address that one just a little bit on the Ottawa, because we've tracked that for a long time, and most of the year it doesn't make a lot of difference to us. One thing that you should consider is that most of the fish in a river are facing up current. Okay, their head is facing upriver, and so that's got some considerations in how you're presenting your bait. When it matters more is in the fall. The colder the weather is, the slower that you are going to troll your baits. And now all of a sudden, depending on the action of your bait, if you're trolling downriver and you're only going 3 or 3.5 miles an hour, and your current on the Ottawa is traveling at 1 mile an hour, now the ability of your bait to have action is compromised trolling downriver. If I turn and I troll upriver at the same speed, I have that current and my bait is still working much more frenetically. And so on some of your bigger baits, your grandmas, your large grandmas, it really makes a difference action wise. And you just heard Gord talk about being erratic and how important that is for triggering a fish. So there's another perspective on up or down river right there. Now, you two are both multi-species anglers. So a 2-part question. What's your favorite fish to fish for? I'll give you a hint. The answer is musky. And then secondly, how does fishing for other species of fish teach you about muskies and help you fish more effectively for muskies?
Go for it.
I think smallmouth are like fishing for smallmouth is one of the main reasons we find good new musky spots. We spend a lot of time fishing for smallmouth in the summer. It's really fun. We fish some of the tournaments around Kenora, and they're definitely my second favorite fish in the summer next to muskies. But when we spend a lot of time fishing for smallmouth, we definitely find a lot of our big musky spots. We'll just have muskies follow in our smallmouths. We'll be fighting a smallmouth and we'll bring him in and he'll be all cut up. I've had times where I've had a muskie latched onto my smallmouth and ripped all the sides off it in a tournament and to turn my nearly 4-pound smallmouth into, I don't know, maybe a pound or something, but it was just a skeleton at that point. But now we know that that's a spot to come back on with proper tackle and proper timing, and we find a lot of our spots due to smallmouth fishing. So
I mentioned this once or twice, so I'll a little and following up on Liam's here. This was one of our secrets for many years. If you don't know a lake and you're going to a lake for the very first time for muskies, make on you got a smallmouth rod in your hand. If you go musky fishing on the spots where you would fish for smallmouth, it can be outrageous. That's the fastest route I know. The other species, John, is Doug Stange and I got onto the swim bait program. We got onto the swim bait program for walleye, and Liam knows what I'm talking about. My best day was 15 walleyes over 10 pounds, and the biggest was 15 right on. And Lake of the Woods is not noted as a big walleye lake. And when we got on the swim bait program 25, 30 years ago, everybody said, oh, come on, you guys are crazy. And there's something about swim baits. And they're a bait that is picked up visually. We've looked at it through underwater cameras. We know how walleyes come in. They scoot in. They first visually see them. And we're throwing for walleyes. Liam and I will throw 3/4 and 1 ounce saltwater jigs and 6-inch swim baits. And we're throwing those for walleyes. And there's only one way you can fish that in 15 feet of water, and that is you snap it, you reel it, you snap it, you reel it, and they inhale it. And as Bob Azumi came up, and Azumi goes, I can't believe you told me this for so many years, and every fish, all you can see is the lead head in the fish's mouth. They inhale it. It is beyond belief how they eat it. So we've been doing this for 20 years, 25 years now. And after about 10, we get bit off all the time. And you go, oh, damn, another northern, another musky. Oh, God. And we're fishing. So we were born at night, but it wasn't last night. So we start putting on, and I'm not sponsored by them, Surflon Supreme wire. It's invisible. And it's 13-pound test. And we splice on about a foot of it. And then we put that between our braid. And now we can cast for walleyes. And as a bonus, we can land these fish that we're biting. Oh, my God. The 28-pound northerns, 24-pound. Oh, my God, a 20-pound, 28-pound. And then we were born at night, but it wasn't last night. What if we go from 6-inch swim baits to 8-inch swim baits to 10-inch swim baits to 12-inch? And I'll tell you, swim baits are an amazing, amazing presentation. Liam is one of the best bulldog. The way he pulls that thing and lets it fall, pulls and lets it fall. And I know I've talked about Landry Smith's rover bait, but I'll tell you, there is something about a swim bait. They are visual. The fish see them. They pull in behind, and it's the tail. Doug and I, we've spent thousands and thousands of hours on swim bait. Believe it or not, the original 1/4-inch grub with a 4-inch grub tail, twister tail, is a swim bait. If you put it underwater and look at it on camera, it actually rolls side to side, but the tail does that. The only 3-dimensional bait that we throw. You start throwing the bigger ones for muskies, and it is unbelievable. They react the very same way. They see it, they pull in behind, they start to follow, and it's something about that rock side to side and the tail movement, and the tail seals the deal. And they don't just lunge at it, they inhale it. And every fish, I do this at my walleye seminars, and people email me, they said, I can't believe it, you're absolutely right. We laughed about it, but you can't see anything but the jig sticking out their mouth. And that tells you that fish thought it was real.
Yep. And
you only can do that fishing for walleyes and smallmouth. Go ahead. Sorry, Liam.
No, my favorite swim bait. You talking muskies or walleyes? Probably my favorite swim bait for muskies is Shadzilla. I really like throwing the 7.5-inch Shadzilla. That's probably my favorite bait for sluggish muskies, maybe pressured muskies or turned off fish. You can always, it always has action, even if you're reeling it slow. So I can slow roll this thing right over the rocks, and it's kicking and it's wobbling, and then maybe I'll give it a pulse and it'll kick out like this, and then I come back and swim it slowly, and it's always moving. Unlike blades, where you have to reel it at a certain pace for it to spin properly, or just zip it over something. This is like dangling it in the fish's face and showing it this bait that's kicking and rocking and going around and ripping it and stuff, and it gets them to go. Even if they're turned off, it's probably my favorite way to catch muskies. There's actually a picture that I brought up of a really chewed up white swim bait, and I actually caught probably I think that was a 25-pound pike that ripped it up, and that was on a really slug. Yeah, right there. It's actually even worse. See, you can see the hooks are cut. The fish absolutely engulfed it. And yeah, it's deadly, especially on turned off fish.
Yeah, and something else about the swim baits is they are easy to fish.
Yeah.
A lot less work than just about any of the other baits that are out there. The grayer your hair gets, the more easy is important. So it's neat to hear you as a young guy with all your energy talk about how good those baits are. And you know, Gordon and I talked about swim baits for the first time a bunch of years ago, and it's a really diverse bait. You can do a whole lot of different things with it. I listened to you explain to me, Gord, about fishing down slopes, fishing from shallow water out to deep water, ripping it off the slope, letting it settle on the bottom again, ripping it off, and then you're covering all the different depths off of a piece of structure. And you know, the fish is somewhere off of the structure. It's just pinpointing where it is that, you know, that makes it work. So yeah, an absolutely critical bait to have in our repertoire these days. Do muskies eat walleyes, Gord?
Of course they do, but walleyes eat muskies. Well, everything eats everything. It's an honest truth. Down below the surface, it is a dog-eat-dog world. Here's a guarantee. I would bet that more muskies are eaten by yellow perch than muskies eat yellow perch. As Sean talked about in the spring, it is a feast. It is a gobble fest. You get 8, 10, 12-inch yellow perch, and they'll eat every muskie that just hatch. I mean, that is nature's way. They're not good or bad. That's the way. That is ecology. That's the way. But you know, I know what you're alluding to, John, and that's down in I happened to co-chair when I was with M&R. I co-chaired the Ontario, Minnesota Fisheries Technical Committee with Jack Strybeck. And Jack was the head of fisheries for Minnesota. And we co-chaired, and this was all the biologists in Minnesota and fish managers from Northwest Ontario. And for sure they eat walleyes. But you know, muskies are very interesting when you look at diet studies. You know, of course they eat walleye. They're not going to swim from that shoal that I talked about, that rock. If there happens to be a nice little walleye in front of it and it's time to feed, of course he's going to eat it. But surprisingly, they eat far more yellow perch, at least on Lake of the Woods, suckers. So yes, they do, but most of the science does show that you can good fish managers select the proper lakes, and you can stock muskies without harming walleye. It's just a fact of life. You can do it. I know you can't convince a lot of cottagers of that. You can't convince the walleye guys of that, but the reality is that is the science. They don't eat most of the time. I mean, they will eat one or two, but big deal. For every walleye, eats all these little tiny muskies as well.
Yeah, the last stomach census that was done around Ottawa goes back, I think, 25 or 30 years. The most common fish in the muskie belly was catfish, and that's because our muskies are close to the bottom. 27, 28% of the biomass in the Ottawa River is catfish. And despite the fact that the walleye guys think that the muskies predate heavily on their walleyes, that's just never been borne out in any of the stomach census, stomach analysis surveys, pretty much anywhere. It's a very minor part of the diet, not something that they go and search out to hunt. It's just opportunistic feeding.
I will say this too, John, because I know you and Spencer last week were talking, and he was talking about following forage out in the open in lakes like here on Lake of the Woods. I'll tell you some of our favorite baits, and Liam will confirm, are Cisco baits. But muskies don't go out and chase them as often as we think. That is, it's totally, I was going to say foreign, but it's not. Muskies are a warm water fish. So they're not going to leave that rock I talked about that is ideal temperature in the high 60s, maybe low 70s. They're not going to go out over 80 feet of water and chase schools of ciscos. If they're an ambush predator, they're totally at a loss to do it. So then you should say to me, then why are you throwing cisco-like bait? Because in the spring they see ciscos, they're sharing the same habitat shallow, but most importantly in the fall, in late October, November, and early December, when the ciscos come in and the whitefish come in, and they devour them. It's to a muskie, a cisco is a T-bone steak, but they don't get the T-bone steak all summer, and that's why we throw them in the summer. I'll tell you the honest truth. My buddy Mark Steffel and I, we go up to Reindeer Lake, and we're fishing for northern pike. And the guy took us to all the shallow backwater bays, and we're going, no, we don't. And he goes, Gord, that's the 70th northern you've caught today. And I said, George, we're having a great day. Don't misunderstand me. But we're not interested in 12, 14, 16-pound northerns. We want giants. I said, here's what I'm looking for. And George, if I catch one fish today, I'll be happy. But if you can take me to the deepest weed line that borders Reindeer Lake. Reindeer Lake's 120 miles long. It's bigger than Lake of the Woods. Gigantic. It's big, way bigger than Lake St. Clair. So he finally took us there. And he took us again. The next spot we went, another shallow back bay. He said, no, George, that's not the spot. Deep weed lines. He took us to, I swear to God that Mark will tell you this is true, took us to a deep weed line, and he goes, I think there's not a lot here. There's only like 18, 20, 30 strands of cabbage, and I could turn behind me, and it's 80 feet deep there. And now we've got a cabbage weed that was about 12 feet deep. I swear this is the truth. Mark put on a 10-inch Williams wobbler single hook. We put a 6-inch white twister tail on the tail, and we started casting, searching for the strands of cabbage. In half an hour, we landed the biggest northern pike in the lodge record that year, and we landed 3 of the other top 5. And you go, but they see they don't get the chance to eat the cisco, but we showed them dinner, and I'm sure those northerns were like, oh my God, a cisco's coming in. And on they go. So just because they hit a cisco bait doesn't mean they're out there in 90 feet of water chasing them in that open. It means, oh my God, this is something I know from October, November, and I love it. And they hit it. So I'm showing them baits they don't normally see in July and August, and they're flipping their hat saying, oh my God, look at this dumb cisco coming in on me, or a whitefish. And that's the reason I think they hit.
Fantastic. That story that you just told, I have heard so many stories like that from you at different presentations on different locations, different lakes, where you do something unorthodox that the guides and the locals don't want to do, and you break all the lodge records. You did that in northern Saskatchewan for lake trout a couple years ago. I was out in the boat looking at my phone, just getting blown away, and you broke all the big lake trout records on one of the northern lakes in Saskatchewan by doing something that nobody else does. And so,
Liam, Liam, tell them about the Bondi bait for lake trout. We didn't even count the 30-pounders.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
It was ridiculous. I think we caught, between Gord and I, it was like just over 300 lake trout in 2.5 days, averaging, I'd say, about 20 pounds. And there was probably at least 50 around 30. And the program we were on was just not speed trolling, but we were probably going about 2.5, I'd say. And with a pretty heavy, like 8-ounce banana weight to a big Bondi. We were actually using the Magnums. And just pumping it, pulling it, bumping it along bottom, slowly trolling, and it was just lights out. It was fit, like my arms were so sore. It was just fish after fish after fish. First fish I caught was a 15-pounder, and the guy just unhooked it and put it back because he was small.
And the other thing, John, one of our buddies, there were 6 of us, one of our buddies doing exactly what we're talking about. We're all fishing together, got 58-pound lake trout, set the lodge record, throwing Bondi baits for lake trout. Yeah. But we're fishing them in ways they've never. Can you imagine a Magnum Bondi? What are they, 12 ounces with another 8 ounces in front of it, ripping it off the bottom? And Liam had, I swear to God, this is the truth, he had 2 lake trout at 2 different times, and he was bringing them in, and both fish were well over 30 pounds, and he had another 30-pounder trying to eat the Bondi bait out of the first lake trout's mouth. And you go, and we had boats coming in behind us, we had boats coming in front of us, and they're all trolling behind us. We make a turn left, they turn left, we make a turn right, they turn, and nobody's catching them. We got the net in the water every 15 minutes.
It was ridiculous.
Yeah, that happens to you a lot. I know.
Not often enough.
Fantastic. Let's talk about timing for a little bit. Timing your fish. Interestingly, you had that giant fish pick with Doug Stange, and you talked about that being an early morning fish, just after sunrise. But you have some really interesting comments on success for big muskies early in the day, and that's not typically your time at all.
In fact, John, if I said morning, I think I said we started in the morning.
Okay.
But that was the last spot. We stopped at night. And Liam can tell you, again, I swear this is the honest truth, is I cannot recall a single big fish I have caught before 12 o'clock. We caught a 30-pound Azumi was up, and he caught his biggest northern pike with me ever, and it was a 30 right on, 50 inches through the ice. And Stangy was up, I got a 54-incher, 32-pound northern. Both of those came at sunset. Every big fish I can recall has come in the afternoon or evening. I cannot recall a single big fish in the morning.
You know, that's interesting. You said that to me a bunch of years ago, and since then I have a few, but I am a sunset into the dark guy too. If you're a musky person, this is the sleep in late and catch more fish. It's a guy's dream. You don't have to be out there at sunrise, 5 o'clock in the morning in the summer. You know, it's definitely a late day, and that's high activities for muskies. And if the people were listening acutely earlier, you commented on when you catch all your big fish. We talked about late in the day, and you even narrowed it down to time of year. And that's going back for decades to your Molson Big Fish contests, where you were the perennial big fish winner in the 80s, you know, all the way till now. What's the best time of year for big fish?
Liam, you answer what you think first.
Muskies, it's definitely in the fall. They're bulking up for winter, just like bears do. They get big. Muskies are almost do nothing in the winter. It's rare to catch one through the ice. They just don't really eat. They kind of just turn off, and they're just slugs all winter. So they're just like bears. Bears hibernate, and they get really fat before they hibernate. So I think late afternoon in the fall, in my opinion, is when you catch your biggest, heaviest fish. And it seems to be that way almost always.
The interesting thing, Lisa, if you could throw up either the very first fish with Doug or the one Liam caught on the last day of the season, if you could throw up either of those 2 images, please. There we go. When you look at these fish, and this is the key, John, when you look at these late fall fish, we call them virgins. They have no marks on them, and they don't have hook marks on the mouth. They don't have split tails. They don't have split fins. They're virgin. We honestly believe the only time we see these fish is November. It is essentially the month of November. And here's what I'll throw out to people to think about. I spent 2.5 years in Thunder Bay working for the Assistant Deputy Minister as his policy advisor. And one of my best friends in Thunder Bay was Dr. Peter Colby. And Peter headed up our walleye research station. And believe it or not, we talked about walleye and understanding other fish. What walleye females do, and obviously this is a female muskie, as soon as the female muskie, or as soon as the female walleye spawns, she moves out to deep water, way deeper than everybody thinks. And why does she do that? She's already big. So if she moves out to deep water, she can forage on ciscos. She can spend all of her time in cold water. She reduces her metabolic rate, and she devotes all of her energy to growing eggs. And here's my question. Is that what these muskies are doing? The only time we see them is the month of November. I know it happens, I think, in Lake Ontario, coming into the St. Lawrence River. I think it happens in every one of our lakes that's deep enough, that has cisco population. I think what some of them do is set up on those 20-foot reefs, 30-foot reefs, underwater points. They don't chase the ciscos as we would think they do. I think they ambush credit them at night. And when the cisco school comes against a rock or whatever, then they ambush them. But I'm starting to believe more and more and more that these giant muskies we catch in November, I do believe the only time we ever see them are that month. Never split fins, never hook marks in the mouth. I do believe they're out deeper, and I do believe they're doing exactly what the big walleyes are doing, and that is devoting as much energy as possible to growing eggs, because the fish itself is as big as it can possibly get. And so it's devoting the energy not to growing even bigger, it's devoting energy to all those eggs that it has inside it. And it's something that just has intrigued me now for a couple of years.
We had the same version of that story 5 or 6 episodes ago, and Sean and I explored it, where you get those virgin fish, no marks, unique color patterns. They're not there the rest of the year. They're not accessible to anglers the rest of the year. It's just when the water temperatures become more uniform after turnover in the lakes, where your typically deep bait fish are now more comfortable in shallow. And these fish, these big muskies are as well. And that's the time, when you're going to find that really big, really special fish. So later in the year, absolutely. If there's a question or two that you have, Lisa, if you want to throw something up, and I'll go. I'll move to another topic while we do that. And we've talked about lure modifications quite a bit in the past. Just while you guys are doing that, everybody hold your glass up. That's Hamilton Chapter Muskies Canada swag right there. Thanks, Dave Bilal. That's because all of us have had the privilege of hanging out in Hamilton, and so we get paid for our presentations. Not a lot, but I'm so happy to have this. So in terms of modifications, I want to ask you about scent, first of all, and I'll preface this. Last week on the Kitchener chapter event, they had 5 notable trollers on there, and the question was asked, do you guys use scent? And 4 of them said no. And the one who did was Kevin Goldberg, well-known American fisherman, and Kevin said he uses WD-40 even to this day as his scent. So let's talk. Do you use scent? What kind of scent do you like? And what do you think about WD-40?
Well, WD-40 is not oil, it's herring-based. So the ingredient in WD-40 is herring. And I love, one of the things I love is going out to the Queen Charlotte Islands and trolling for salmon. And lot of the salmon guys spray WD-40 on their bait, herring bait. Do we use it here? In the old days, religiously, and I have slipped in the past 5 or 10. But I do believe in scent. I do believe it can be important. And more this way, John, I don't believe it does anything to turn off the fish. So if it helps you catch 1 or 2 extra, why would you not use it? I don't think it turns fish off. But on the lure modification side, I will say this. I don't think we fish a single bait out of the box the way it comes.
No. And in my opinion,
I'll say on some of them.
I think too, like muskies know when your lure hits the water. We've said that multiple times. They're patrolling the area. They're the alpha. They know exactly when your bait hits the water. If they want to come check it out, they will. The time that I think scent might come into play is when you're figure eighting the fish, or if they have their nose right up to it. It might be the trigger to get them to bite, but it doesn't attract any more fish, I don't think. So if you're seeing fish and they're not biting, maybe add scent. But I think that's mostly what it does for you is trigger it at the last second just before it's going to eat or maybe veer off.
Ian's got a good, awesome stuff for the favorite modification. I'll tell you my favorite model, and Liam can think about his. This is, and again, I've told this story many, many times. Probably 25 years ago, fishing with my buddy, and his dad owned Ash Rapids Camp on Lake of the Woods here, and phenomenal Alex Clinton, phenomenal musky angler. And Alex had a grandma bait, and this is 30 years plus ago. So we're on a favorite spot. Liam knows where it is, down lake. And we're in the fall, and he's casting this grandma, and he's ripping it, and I got one. Beautiful musky. Comes up out of the water, we fight it, comes up, he lost it. So he lost this musky, and it's got his bait, a grandma bait in its mouth. This is over 30 years ago. The weekend passes, about 5 days later, my buddy who owns a cottage about a half a mile down the bay, I can't believe this, comes into the office at M&R and says to me, I know you musky fish this bait washed up on shore. You want it? And it's Alex's grandma bait. This is 30 years ago. And I said to Richard, are you kidding? I'll give you a bottle of wine for that. I traded him a good bottle of French wine for that grandma bait. I have caught somewhere between 500 and 1,000 muskies easily on that one particular bait. It was so incredible. As soon as he came up on his television show, and Bob's seen it in action, Bob filmed at least 2 shows. He did one dedicated, not to me, to this bait. It is the most incredible thing you have ever seen. Now imagine the lip. Imagine the lip on the bait, and right where the lip, so the lip on the grandma comes into the bait right here, and it was like someone took a Dremel tool, and I'm sure it was when Alex was casting it, he must have hit a rock. And right where the lip hits the bait, there was a chunk taken out. And I'm sure that was what caused that bait. And I've always called it hunting for center. You always, when we talked about trolling, you always, always, always want a bait that hunts for center. When you're casting, you always, always, always want a bait that hunts for center. And Ricky's the only angler in Bassmaster history to win 4 Bassmaster Classics over 4 separate decades. And Ricky's in his 70s, he's the same age as I am, and he'll go to a swimming pool, and he puts a camera over the pool, and he'll throw out 500 identical baits and records every single one of them, looking for the single bait that hunts for center. And it is killer. It is the most incredible thing you have ever seen. I'm not talking a bait but bait that's out of tune that comes back. Out of tune always goes one way. A bait that hunts for center, you can't control what it does. It goes one way and then it does that. If you find a bait that does that, it is absolutely out of this world, the most incredible bait you have ever seen. And we have 2 or 3 of them. And when the chips get down, that is my go-to. Now, I've had the bill replaced, and Doug was out with me. I cast it after 30 years. The plastic bill broke, and I got it replaced. And that was probably 5 years ago. I have not caught a single fish on that grandma bait. Now, at the Hamilton chapter I mentioned, because I broke the bill again, and Dave at Trojan Baits, Dave said, ship it to me, and he's put me an ultra thin bill on it, and that was the original. And I can't wait until this spring to go back out with that thin bill and fish it again. Got to tell you one other quick story about Ricky Clunn. He won the Bassmaster Classic, $1 million. He won $1 million. 10 years later, went back to the same lake. When he won it casting crankbait. So he was firing crankbait between 2 islands, and there was a shallow rock ridge between the 2 islands. He won the Bassmaster Classic. Everybody knew what he was throwing, and Ricky laughed that after 10 years, when he came back and saw it 10 years later, so many anglers had thrown so many crankbaits over that shallow rock reef, they had worn a hole through the rock. That's how many crankbaits had come over it. What do you think he won the Bassmaster Classic on that identical lake? What did he win it on? The exact same lure. But what did he do? He took a Dremel tool and he shaved it so fine, so thin, and so razor sharp at the lip. He said every bass that saw it had never seen one before, and they saw it for the very first time, and he won another $1 million at the tournament, won the Bassmaster Classic again. And so those lips on those crankbaits, those jerk baits, those dive baits, that's one of my all-time favorite modifications. What's yours, Liam?
Shouldn't ask me that.
Yeah.
Well, you talked about this last time, so I'm sure I can say it. Little Colorado blades on the back of our hard baits is definitely.
Oh, you're in trouble now.
You're in trouble.
Yeah.
We'll put big Colorados, big flashy. We'll take the treble hooks off. If that treble comes right off the tail, we'll take the treble off, and we don't want a treble on the back trail in our bait. We put a big flashy Colorado, and now you think, look at John Bondy's Bondy bait, and you look at what John and I, 15 hours on the Detroit River. We put 11 in the boat, 3 over 40 pounds. It was. I've never seen anything like that in my life. I know we hooked a near world record fish. I guarantee it was near world record muskie. We lost it, and Brandon Broderick, who was filming, I held Brandon by the back of his pants as he was holding on, and that fish took drag and then broke off. I guarantee it was close, and that would have been 12 fish in the boat, and that would have been our 5th over 40 pounds in 15 hours. And you think that that big Colorado blade on a Bondy bait isn't important? Lights out important.
Yeah, it's not because a Bondy bait is a pretty bait by any means. It's an ugly, simple hunk of rubber that just catches fish. And you talked about it for lake trout, for big pike. I know your stories with those, for muskie. And so, yeah, there's absolutely something to that modification. Absolutely. Do rivers have thermoclines like lakes, and does the current or water movement prohibit it? And as a general rule, yes, the current does drastically affect thermocline. They don't set up nearly as well as they do now on places like the Winnipeg River.
it's almost in many spots not really a river, it's more a flowage. And then, so if you're on big sand, little sand, and rough rock, and then coming down, but as you get down into the powder puff, then all of a sudden the thermocline totally breaks down. So rivers are tricky from that very perspective. And so on rivers, as John, you know better than anyone, there's the best river guide musky fisherman in the world. Current is the influence on rivers.
Absolutely. Wow, you're taking me back when you mentioned big sand, little sand, raspberry, rough rock. That's where I started fishing, Gord. So Winnipeg River, still just classic Canadian Shield musky fishing. One of my favorite places of all time. Somebody asked us a moment ago your very favorite way to catch muskies. All three of us. You guys go ahead.
Bucktails. I just think it's so much fun seeing the fish come in. You can work them so nice in the figure eight. They're easy, like they're hard to reel, but they're easy to figure eight. They're easy to cover water with, and they just catch muskies. I know it's a pretty generic response, but they catch fish for me, and I love them. So.
And he caught his biggest of his life on one. So
yeah.
Good read.
That'll do it, Gord.
Top waters. They're the 10% solution. They work about 10% of the time, but the question was my favorite way, and top waters are my favorite way. Liam was out this year. We were out, and it started to porridge on team, like summer monsoon, right about 6 o'clock. And we said, "Oh God, we got to run for shelter." So we went in this little sheltered bay during the monsoon, and we ate our lunch in this little tiny cove. And he finished his lunch before I did. And he said, "You keep eating. I got to make it." And he threw my top water out. And he had this giant with how many casts within 3-4 casts?
Yeah, probably on the third. And the fish blew up on the bait twice in the single cast. He missed it the first time and then came back and got it again. And then literally 2 casts after that, he came back, but somehow I didn't hook this fish. But I don't know, maybe it's just me. But it was pretty cool seeing this thing just explode on the top water.
Yeah, you can't beat the visual nature of a fish eating a topwater, whether it's a bass, whatever you're fishing for with topwater. You just see the whole eat, you see the action, you see the fish coming out of the water, and you can't beat that. So I'll cheat and steal both your answers and say I love catching them on topwaters, but if you look behind me, we make these for a reason. And a quote from Dan Moats, who makes Spanky baits, is, there is always a fish that will eat a blade bait. So if you fish it right, you present it right, you know what you're doing with it, you can always trick a fish with blade. And, again, you catch so many fish at the side of the boat, and the craziest 45 seconds that you can have in freshwater fishing in North America is that 4-foot fish that comes in behind your blade bait, and you turn it in you stay calm, you turn it in a circle 3 times, and then you see the fish eat, and it's total uncontrolled insanity, till you get it together. And that moment, that's why so many of us musky fish, we fish all day for 30 seconds as a musky guy and go, wow, what an amazing 12-hour day we just had. And that's the weirdness that is being a musky fisherman. So yeah, our conversation would go deep into the night if I didn't start to steer it to an end somewhere. And I had a bunch of other places to go here, but I want to ask you, I'll go to 2 different places here at the end. Gord, you've spent a lifetime studying muskies on Lake of the Woods. When you're younger, you see what's there now, and your consideration is, I want to catch fish. I want to catch them now. I want to catch more fish. You're visiting water, and it's all about the pursuit of the fish. But you don't really see long-term. You don't understand that the healthier the population is, the more fish you catch, that things change. And things are changing faster now than ever before. Man has changed water flows, brought invasives in. Climate change affects fish way more than these days. What do you see with your experienced eyes uh, as change, and maybe relate it to to um, to Lake of the Woods? The greatest, the grandfather place of musky fishing. What do you see for change, and what are your concerns and considerations?
I have to be honest, John. I do worry a bit. I grew up. I was both fortunate. I was fortunate to be up here during the Wabigoon craze when Bernie LeBeau was doing his PhD, and Dr. Crossman, Ed Crossman. I knew Ed and interviewed him, and I talked to Bernie. But I was here working for MNR when the word got out on Wabigoon. And I saw the musky world descend on it, and I saw what happened to it. And I remember talking to Ed Crossman afterwards, and Ed told me, I'm worried that there are so few muskies left in Wabigoon Lake, they won't find each other to spawn in the spring. And we don't ever want to see that happen again. The invasives really worry me on Lake of the Woods. We did a 5-year tracking study when I was with MNR here. We did a 5-year tracking study of smallmouth, and we scuba dived. I took the guys out to my all-time favorite spawning bay, and we actually scuba and snorkeled down and got the bass, and we had to surgically implant and put radio tags in them. And when we did that, we did it when they were on the nest. We had to leave a technician down on the bottom, keeping the rusty crayfish from eating all the eggs. And then we brought the male back after he recovered and recuperated, put him back on so he could defend. You heard Sean talk about muskies. Muskies are so faithful to their spawning home base that a big female will keep other big females out of the area. So it's not like there are hundreds of fish pulling into these places to spawn. The other thing is, and Bernie showed this in his work, in the lakes with northern pike, they don't spawn where we think that they spawn. They don't spawn on the traditional vegetated areas. They actually pull out and they spawn over detritus and mud on the bottom. And in our area on Eagle, Wabigoon, Black Sewell, Lake of the Woods, they're really susceptible to spring windstorms, and it turns over and they get the mud and detritus, and they get covered, and they just don't hatch. Now you throw rusty crayfish onto the scene, and on Lake of the Woods, we could safely, sustainably harvest 9 to 11 million pounds a year. That's sustainably harvested. So that tells you how many billions of rusty crayfish are on the bottom, gobbling up eggs. And we've now got spiny water fleas coming in, and I'm worried. We have no vegetation. The rusty crayfish, they don't eat the vegetation. They actually clear it off so that they can see the native crayfish, and then they kill them. So they clear the weeds as a feeding strategy. But none of it is good for muskies. And I truly, truly worry.
Yeah, it sounds like another area that's going through really substantial environmental change and is really in need of research and eyes on the problem to see how this develops. Again, our Canadian fish up here, we don't stock. It is a completely different world than in the US. We have wild fish, and we rely on natural reproduction and natural recruitment in a system. And so when things change, when that order gets altered, big changes happen. And so, another place that we really need to get some eyes on in the musky world. And last week, there's a video making the rounds of you and Jimmy Sarek at the Toronto Fish and Boat Show. And unsolicited, you two talked about the importance of Muskies Canada and Muskies Incorporated in terms of being caretakers, being the advocates for the fish themselves. No other group does that. Nobody else does that. Can you just offer a few of those words up here on the importance of those organizations and supporting them?
When I was the district manager here in Kenora, we were one of the first in the world to go to modern muskie management. And I'd be fired today. I'd be fired by the ministry for what I did, because the only people back then, John, I think the minimum size when I first came here was 38 inches or 40 inches. The only people that were killing these fish were walleye anglers, bass anglers, cottagers who caught them. They weren't the musky anglers. They were letting them go. And so I called Muskies Inc. in the States and Muskies Canada in Canada here. And I said, come on, guys, let's rally. And I can't be fired anymore. I'm retired. So I didn't go through public consultation. I contacted the tourist industry, the guys who ran the lodges that catered to the muskie anglers. I contacted Muskies Inc., Muskies Canada, the OFAH, and I said, this is stupid, guys. We need to be at 48, and eventually we went to 54, and we did it for the rest of the world. And what shocked us, John, was how fast the fish responded every time we made a move. I'll never forget Tom Mosby, who headed up our Lake of the Woods Fisheries Assessment Unit. And Tom came to me a couple of years after we went from 40 to 48. He said, I can't believe this. Every time we sample, they're getting closer to 48. I can't believe how fast they do it. Then we went to 54. I can't believe how fast they're going to 54. And Muskies Canada and Muskies Inc., I can't think of any two maybe Ducks Unlimited in the hunting realm, but there is no organization in fishing. And here's the key. We have the best fish. You listen to the walleye guys, look at Mille Lacs in Minnesota. You look at what's coming on Lake of the Woods here in terms of walleye. You look at the Kawartha Lakes and we've gone to nothing over 8. Bass fisheries, nothing is as good as the muskie fishing today is as good as it's ever been, probably better. And it's because of two groups, Muskies Canada and Muskies Inc. They care about the resource. They're always trying to learn. They work with the science folks. They don't question the results. And you know what? I've told you this many, many times. I used to scare groups. And I'll be honest, I didn't give a shit when we went to public consultation. And they'd start yelling at me and whatever. And I said, listen, guys, don't you ever forget. You don't get the fishery you want. You get the fishery you deserve. You don't want to go to 6. You want to keep staying at 6 and 8 walleyes and kill 10-pound fish. You'll get the walleye fishery you deserve. And the muskie guys have never been like that. They have no vested interest. Their interest is the fish. And trust me on this. Watch any public consultation that's going on any lake across northern Ontario, and the cottage owners are worrying about the cottagers, and the bass guys are worrying about the bass guys, and the walleye guys are worrying about the walleye, and muskies worry about the fish. They worry about the resource, and they have the fishery they want, and they have the fishery they deserve, and it's the best in the world, and it's the best in the world for a reason.
And we all want it to stay that way. So supporting those two organizations, Spencer Berman said it really well at the end of our program last week. If you care about the fishery, it doesn't matter if you attend a meeting. It doesn't matter if you don't like the politics around a chapter or where you are. Supporting those organizations is supporting muskies, and it's supporting the future of muskies. And so that's one of the things that we try and drive home, in our program every single week. Your quote of "you get the fishery that you deserve" couldn't be truer, and so important to consider. You guys being on the program, 5-star, fan-damn-tastic. Thanks very much. I got to go to school again with you, like I do every time I hear you talk. One of my proudest moments in fishing is netting you a musky gourd the first time. And Liam, one of my future proudest moments in muskies is when I'm going to get to net you a muskie. I can't wait to do that. And so all the best. Can't wait to share a boat with you. Super, super time here, guys. Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you, John.
Thank you.